you see people that believe the same things that you believe in, and they're like brutally executed because of their belief, and it's not treated that way.
There was hate on a post on this documentary that's supposed to combat hate.
This will go down as like the latest Jeb's World podcast of
The
all
latest
time.
podcast, yeah.
During Ramadan, all the things.
It's like
But
Club
you know what?
Shay Shay without
These guys kept me up till 11 tonight.
No. In a way, it worked out because, like, you know, we both broke our fast. We've got like, you know, hopefully enough food within our systems
energy.
right now. We got some energy.
Yeah.
You know, our sleep schedules are way off anyway. So this is probably the most active you'll see any Muslim like throughout the whole day. For Ramadan. So you this is actually a good time. It worked out the way.
This is when the recording needs to go down. And you got the wolf pack on, like we're
got
just,
the wolf pack on. Yeah.
Energy, spirit is good. Spirit is good.
We're very blessed right now.
The only thing you got to do is just like keep this microphone about like a fist away from your mouth.
Yeah.
Okay.
There you go.
And you can move that thing around. Just
That's
watch
pretty
it.
cool, man.
Yeah. You know, we try to be as legit as we can around here.
Yeah.
No, you're legit. I heard the one with is it Sharif?
Yeah, Sharif.
Yeah. I heard a little bit of that one, and then the last one that you had with, was it Greg? What's his name?
Greg. Yeah.
Greg. Yeah.
Yeah. Dude, the coolest part about the podcast has been like, it's given me, and not that like you guys wouldn't talk to me without a podcast, but it's like, it's been a cool reason to get to have like a very direct conversation with someone. So like Greg is the owner of this regenerative vineyard out in Chapel Hill, who's like a super successful VC, like a guy who probably wouldn't really give me the time of day without having, you know, some sort of like creative thing being. So he came through, we had like an hour-long conversation. And then Sharif's a homie. Like Raleigh Raw has been kind of on the forefront of like juices and like cleansing for a minute. He's been a homie for a minute and like just has his own like, you know, whole spirituality, perspective, all the things. So like always linking up with him is a fun conversation, super insightful. So the podcast has been just like a fun education in a way. And then when Uzi invited me out to come see the doc and whatnot, I was sitting there and I was like, you know what? Like, I got a couple questions.
Yeah.
I got a couple of things that I got to talk about, some things that I need to get some clarity on. So, and then at the end of it, when you guys were talking about what's one of the best ways that we can sort of like champion the idea of what this film was meant for, of just like having conversations. It's like, you know what? Like, this is just such an obvious, like something was like in my head, like what, like this needs to happen. So we made it happen. We just had to wait a little while for Omar to show up. Made it happen.
Had to be
I'm not gonna let you get out of it. I'm not gonna let you get out.
No, you keep stabbing. You know, keep jabbing at me. That's good. I think. How did you guys know each other? Where'd you? Guys meet?
So we both went to business school together at NC State for undergrad.
That's right.
And I'm like you studied entrepreneurship, I studied finance. So we definitely had a couple of we definitely had some classes. I can't remember
like the
which
general ones, right?
The gen eds for like the for the business school.
Marketing 101.
Supply chain 101.
That's the easy A.
Price,
right?
product, promotion.
Yeah.
Wasn't it 4 Ps?
There's probably our 4 dang
I think so, yeah.
placement. It didn't work. It didn't work.
Exactly. But we actually reconnected online. He actually pretty much like over LinkedIn.
Yeah.
We had a quick follow-up call.
Well, we did some videos together back in the day.
We did some videos together back in the day as well. And college was a time where I was slowly getting into filming at the tail end of when I was supposed to graduate from state. And at the time, you were still at Monty doing a lot of marketing
that was the startup
for them.
I was working for.
Yeah, and from there, when I told you, like once we reconnected and told you about like the podcast, it was just it was interesting because from like afar, I saw you create Bert from almost nothing into now you got your own office. We're doing this podcast. All the amazing things that you've done with a lot of your clients, online, especially for social media. And I thought it would be a really cool perspective to just kind of like branch our worlds together, because like I come from, a long form content background, and my first experience working on a big doc like this,
For sure.
and so I really appreciate you, coming, and everyone else who came out to that screening.
You had a good showing, I thought. Honestly,
it was great. I think we definitely had at least like 150 people at Witherspoon.
Yeah, it was like 300 because it was sold
300.
out.
Okay, yeah. I'm not good with numbers. That's why I left finance. Yeah.
Omar, what was your background in film before before this documentary?
I was mostly a consumer.
Yeah. Okay.
No, I mean, like, and this is part of what we were talking about before. So since I was probably 12, 13, I would love to do skits at like school and then in the community. So I was known as like the entertainment guy. Like whenever you had like a big event or a fundraiser, you'd, call up Omar, like, okay, he's going to come through, create some kind of funny skit, like an SNL.
The jester.
Yeah. Like an SNL thing. Like I remember one of the ones we had was we put like a big box on one of my friends, and that was representing like the TV.
Okay.
And it was at the time when people were like, we're losing our kids to TV. Like they're watching 3-4 hours a day. Yeah. So we're like, how do we turn this into a funny skit, but with a moral? So that kids are like learning, like, hey, don't spend all your time on TV.
You were
right?
coming with the subtle subliminal messages.
Yeah, it's like the last minute of the Jerry Springer. You know, it's like you wrap it up with a nice moral, and so people love that. They're like, oh, this is cool. Like, so I started directing. So people would have weddings and they'd invite me in and like do a skit.
Oh wow.
Yeah. So it was like that was always something that I just was inclined towards and I loved doing.
Yeah.
But then I was like, oh, this is the 90s, right? In like early 2000s. Like
nowadays you put a TikTok
I got to go make money. Yeah, exactly. Because like, you're either going to go to Hollywood like Tariq, our filmmaker, he literally went to Hollywood and just started working, whereas for me, it was like, I was the oldest. My family's like, all right, you got to be responsible. We didn't come from much. So I paid for college and all that myself. Yeah. And so I just started working at like, 14, 15 and then just, went to college for finance and stuff like that. But then when Tariq called me, because my brother-in-law and him are cousins.
Got it.
He's like, hey, you got to meet this guy. He's got this great, footage and he wants to make it into a documentary about this tragedy that happened. And I've just always been supportive of artists and creators.
For sure.
And it was that. Like, how do I bring my business background and kind of the contacts that I have and support this film to actually get it into into production. So
for sure.
Yeah. So he's like, you're going to be my executive producer. I'm like, I don't even know what that means. Like, and I just started learning, 8 years ago.
That's cool.
Pretty much the biggest sponsor.
Basically, I realized that.
I had a feeling that this was your first like project like this, so that's cool to hear how it all came.
That doesn't sound like a compliment.
Well, when after we watched it, I think the first thing I said to you was like, "Man, this was the production value of this," and I meant this as a compliment. I don't know if it came off as like, this was way better than I thought it was going to be. Because when you first told me about it, I was like, "Oh, how was this put together?" And then I was sitting there watching. I was like, this could be a Netflix thing. This could be Amazon. Like that was so well put together from a story standpoint, as well as the quality of the footage, the audio. I mean, how you guys built anticipation, energy, all the things. So I was super impressed with just how it all came together, which was one of the reasons why I thought it was so moving to the crowd itself. So, I mean, kudos to getting the footage, kudos to putting it together, man. So like, snaps for you guys.
Appreciate it. Yeah.
What was the process? I mean, for both of you, like you kind of you were doing a little bit of this before, but you came into these roles kind of like a story that had a lot of meaning to you from like a cultural standpoint, as well as just like, so there's a weight on your shoulders from that standpoint, but then there's the other weight of like, I've got to execute at this level for my people, as well as just because I want to do a good job. Like, how did you come into this to execute at that level with the first thing you're doing?
To be honest, it's really hard to it's really hard to kind of like put into those types of words because one of the victims' brother, Faris Barakat, he actually studied entrepreneurship at State. So he was I think he was a part of the entrepreneurship clinic as well.
Yeah.
He had reached out to me in 2016 and was like, hey, these guys from Hollywood are coming to, direct this documentary. I know you're just getting into film, but like these guys need some help on set. Would you help out? And I'm like, absolutely. Like, why wouldn't I? And so, for the next, 4 or 5 days after a year since the Chapel Hill shooting, I didn't know anything about production or what it meant to be on set. So the only thing I knew how to do was carry equipment, and I didn't even know I didn't know what a C-stand was, like, but like I had to figure out how to like set something up. And everything was just kind of learning on the job. I mean, it was also very high pressure, very high emotions, high stakes as well. But it was the best way for me to learn, and at that time the best way that I knew how to contribute, even though I didn't know anything. One thing that I learned very quickly though was especially when you're working on set with directors and producers and DPs, everyone's got a role and they have to stick to that role. When you are assigned a specific role within production, you do your job, just like in any sports, right? Like do your job. Don't overstep by giving your opinion on something where it wasn't asked, right? And I learned that very early on, and but it was enough for them to want to continuously asking me for help. And even through like my film journey in between, I was also just learning on my own through YouTube and freelancing, whatever opportunities came my way. YouTube University, exactly. But I took full advantage of their help and support anytime they came to the Triangle to continue filming for this doc. And it was the story was ever changing because no one ever knew, like, we all knew what the outcome of the shooting was, but the trial date hadn't even been set yet. No one knew exactly what the political landscape of the story was going to turn out.
For sure.
So while you're
almost uncovering new information about this story as the case is being fought in its own right.
Exactly.
And trying to put together this overall narrative. I mean, you've got a lot of inputs to try to work with on the fly.
Exactly. I mean, you might be able to speak more about this, but in my conversations with Tariq, the idea first started out as like a single documentary, and then it changed to a doc series where it would have been like an episode about each one of the victims.
Interesting.
Before it kind of came back to just the one doc in and of itself. So it went through its own. It went through many evolutions.
Yeah. What were those conversations like? How were you guys thinking about that?
Yeah, I mean, back to your question about just the burden you carry from a cultural, religious background, right? You see people that believe the same things that you believe in, and they're like brutally executed because of their belief, and it's not treated that way. And it's like, oh, there's all these excuses that were given, whether it's parking dispute or whatever, or they're just young kids that were messing around. They were disrespecting people, and these are all things that the killer was saying. And so I'm like, the best thing we could do is get the story right, and at least be able to put to memorialize it through this storytelling format, which is film. And so we did go through, because there's over 600 hours of footage that Tariq, I mean, you got to give them like a lot of credit. Like Tariq, Sean, Chris, that whole team's amazing, and the editors that we hired, just top notch. And we, because of the story and the people that were involved, and just the level of dignity and integrity that they had, like the families of the victims, and we're like, we had no choice but to get the top quality production done.
For sure.
Like it wasn't even, and even a lot of funding came from, family members and community members that I know. And they're like, we're going to pony up because if there's any story that we need to tell, it's this story, because it not only hit on, people that were treated, were executed because of their religion, and we happen to share that. But it's also because of whatever the belief system was that they followed. Like in this case, it was Islam. But for this guy, it didn't matter. They could have been Asian. They could have been whatever. And you never know if you don't say, no, hey, this is not going to work. We're not going to let this happen. We're not going to let you get away with this and change the narrative the way you want to, because the next day it's you're gonna do something against a black person, which we've seen, right? You're gonna go do something against Jews. You're gonna go do something anti-Semitic or whatever. And if we don't stop it and we speak out about it and in the highest quality way, then it doesn't have the impact that it should. And they deserve. So that was the thing. It was like, we're going to do it in the best possible way. We want to get it onto a major streaming service. And so then we started looking at, hey, there's all this footage. There's all these storylines. So like, think about this, right? You've got, and at that time we had a lot of the immigrant conversation was happening because Trump, came into office, and he was like doing the travel ban and, immigration issues. You had seen people on boats literally going from, to another country. And you're like, do we stop them? Do we not? And so immigration was a big topic. Well, these kids came from immigrant families. Their parents were immigrants.
Yeah. Most of the community over here within the Triangle area is actually, we all come from immigrant families, especially myself.
I'm an immigrant, from Iraq. So the immigrant story was a big one. Two, this was a love story. Like Yusuf and Leah, they had just gotten married. Leah's best friend is his brother-in-law. Like it was such a cool story. And then you've got Razan, who's the sister-in-law, and then you had like these two families coming together, and it was so beautiful. It's like an American love story, right? These two people and families that came from the other part of the world, meeting in the Triangle area, coming together, college and whatever, and playing basketball.
For sure.
And now they're together. And it's like, that's a beautiful story, right?
It is.
Then tragedy strikes, right? And it's not just a drive-by, or it's not some like random thing. It's like, no, this is a neighbor who took offense to what their belief system was, how they dressed, who they were. And then he executed them. So it's like, now that's a storyline, and we know how true crime, is hot right nowadays.
So hot.
Then you have the media bias that kind of, was out there.
Oh my God.
You had the police kind of taking the killer's narrative. Then you had this whole idea of, this is a hate crime, and it's not even being talked about as a hate crime. So like that's a whole story that takes you all the way back to KKK, and so we had so many different storylines. Then we're like, dang, Trump just came into office, and this is escalating hate crimes all over the place. The political atmosphere is, another storyline. So there were so many different storylines. That's when we were like, we got to do a series. Like we could do like 4 or 5, and Netflix at the time was doing a lot of docuseries. So, but then when we pitched it, it was like, this is good, but it felt like it was getting a little bit far away from the core of the story, which was this tragedy, these victims, right? And so we're like, okay, great, we can condense it, make it into a 90-minute feature, and we think we can get a lot of the, the hard-hitting stuff in there.
For sure.
But it was so, I wasn't as close to it as like Tariq and Sean were, and they had to cut some amazing like footage. I can only imagine it was 600 hours. So hard.
So walk me through then what your role as executive producer looked like then in the general sort of like progression of creating the film.
Yeah, on the job training, right?
Yeah.
So
for both of you guys.
yeah, no. First and foremost, just like Usman said, it's you got to believe in the project.
Yeah.
Like you can't do it just for oh, this is a nice side gig or it's a good job.
You can't just do it like if you're solely doing it just for the sake of experience. It's you're not gonna get like the true value out of actually being a part of a story like an initiative, a story like this.
Yeah.
I mean, this literally happened while we were both at NC State, right? These were former NC State graduates as well. So
which was embarrassing because I realized how little I knew about the situation.
Yeah.
Like I didn't even know any of the real detail about the dynamic or execution, like even the details around like the narratives that were being presented versus what the truth was. Like
exactly, and that responsibility ended up falling on the community and people like us who are storytellers to like change the narrative, get the word out there. If the CHPD and these big media networks are calling this a parking dispute, like it's up to us to set the story straight.
Yeah.
So that was, I'm thankful to be a part of community who are where a lot of people are advocating for the right story to be told. Because I think in a way without them, like they definitely make our jobs a lot easier. And they would be a lot more receptive to not only want to watch this documentary, but also to also share it with their network as well.
For sure.
Yeah. So just to go back to that question, right? So I'll be honest with you. In the beginning, I had no idea what Tarek was talking about in terms of, hey, because I just started helping. Yeah. Like, and this is as entrepreneurs, this, right? Like, you just jump in, just like Usman was saying.
What fire's burning? I got a bucket of water. I can go find a bucket of water.
Yeah.
Like,
Tarek's like, look, the first thing was I need to get a ticket, a flight to Turkey, because the year before, I think it was the year before they died, they had volunteered, Leah was doing dentistry school, right? So he volunteered his time to help refugees in Turkey because there was a refugee crisis. And so Tarek was like, dude, I need like $25K. Like, I want to go there, film the people that benefited from him, and film the families as they're going and volunteering and kind of carrying this legacy on. And so found $25K. I was like, all right, great, got you. Fundraiser. Gave him $25K. He went and was able to do it. My family was so supportive. They helped fund a lot of that. And then it was like, great, what's the next thing? He's like, well, now I need this equipment, right? Or I need to get on a plane and interview so and so. I need to come, to the Triangle and do post interviews. And great, what do you need? I need cash. I need this contact. Hey, put me in touch with an expert on Islamophobia, or put me in touch with it. So just started doing stuff like that. Yeah. And he's like, you know what you're doing, right? I was like, what do you mean? He's like, this is like producer level work. This is like,
you're putting the pieces together.
And I was like, don't put a label on it, because I wasn't comfortable. I'm like, that's not my job. Like, I don't want to presume that I have the skill and I'm doing something that I didn't even understand what it was.
For sure.
So then it went like years later. He's like, look, I want to officially put you on as like the executive producer because we raised a lot of money. We were able to get to a certain point. We were making decisions like, should we continue to make the documentary or stop and pitch studios on like a 15-minute teaser, right? Or a 15-minute version. And, we tried one thing and then we changed. So there was a lot of strategy that we had to go through. Damn. And then we realized like, okay, there's a core team here that's really kind of, moving this forward. And it all started with just believing in the project and just continuing to believe in the team, that was behind the project. Yeah. And then the story that we wanted to tell. And then amazing people like Usman would jump in and support. And then you had like several different people that helping with sound and music and editing. And just, it was it takes a village to make something like that.
Seriously.
Sure.
It speaks to like how powerful it is when you have like an aligned community of people coming together to build something.
Totally.
Because your end product is so powerful with that.
Yeah, it really starts with bringing in people together who share the same core values. And it makes the project a lot more meaningful, especially if it's touched, and impacted everyone in the same way with the story.
Yeah. So we didn't really go through the specifics of the story, so maybe we can go through that before we go into, because I have like a couple things I want to ask you guys about the actual, like some questions. One of them is like, what's the deal with the wife? Did you guys, the wife of the guy?
The wife of the killer?
Yeah.
Oh, the wife of the killer.
So I got to ask about her. But maybe before we get into some of this stuff, can you guys walk people just through kind of at a macro standpoint, the general storyline here?
Yeah, I'll start. So, essentially, it was February 10th or February 15th. I think February 10th, right?
Yeah, 2015.
Yeah, February 10th, 2015. There were 3 students that were shot, killed, executed style in their own apartment in Chapel Hill, North Carolina, at Summerwalk Circle.
While they're having dinner.
While they're having dinner, yeah. So those victims, Dia Barakat, Yusur Abu Salha, and Razan Abu Salha, Allah yarhamu. They were they were executed by a man named Craig Stephen Hicks. Craig Hicks at the time was their neighbor within the same apartment complex at Summerwalk Circle. And, there were repeated incidents that Craig Hicks would harass them by, flashing his gun, just giving them a lot of problems, everything from, like flashing his gun to just giving them a hard time about like the parking spot situation. He was claiming that there were certain spots that he was entitled to within that block. And, for those out there who get the chance to watch the documentary, there's definitely an area of the story where, we highlight exactly which spots that he claimed versus, where those victims were actually had their cars parked during the night of the shooting. Immediately,
which is almost kind of funny that you have to do that justification, because killing someone over a parking spot is ridiculous.
Exactly.
No matter what the situation is. Yeah. Like it's crazy. But
it's as if he set up the story before the kill, and then like killed them, and then said, it's parking, right? And then when you look at the facts, you're like, no, it wasn't the parking.
No, not at all.
Yeah. And so immediately, I would say that night or the following morning, CHPD, or the Chapel Hill Police Department, issued a statement saying that these three people were killed over a parking dispute, and it was incredibly insulting because these 3 kids were on the pedigree of not only just like achieving, things like major things in life, but they were in their own homes when this happened. It's incredibly insensitive and demoralizing to just frame it that way, without even so much as starting an investigation of as far as where, let's check the facts before issuing a statement. For sure.
Like no one looked at the parking lot.
No one looked at the parking lot.
Dispute crime.
And it turned out that statement came from Craig Hicks himself.
Yeah.
The CHPD took his word, someone who literally turned himself in to jail that night immediately after killing them. the CHPD took his word for it and then issued the statement afterwards.
Yeah, let's take the murderer lunatic's word
exactly
as our source of truth.
Exactly.
And report it to the public.
And
don't give away too much of the movie.
Sorry, I apologize.
Watch it.
I'll stop it there. But if that doesn't at least like make you upset, or at least, you know, say subconsciously, hey, this is like something wrong, then
well, for the sake of for people to watch it, the ending is super powerful, so you got to make it to the end of the film. I mean, that's where like everything really comes together in a really powerful way. Okay, so I'm glad you said that, because now I want to get into some specifics here.
Sure.
So as a part of the film, there's a scene where the wife is being interviewed by the news, and she's talking about her husband. And in the film, she's mentioned, I think that's like the one time that she comes into the equation. I'm sitting there like, what was this lady doing? Did they live together? Like, do you know any more about the wife and her sort of like relationship with this guy?
Yeah, I personally don't.
Okay, so here's the deal. At least what we know, or at least what I know from the research that we did, they had issues. Okay. This was like, I don't know, I think third wife he was on. Like, he had multiple ex-wives before. Yeah. She owned the apartment. So it was her apartment. She owned it.
Yeah.
And by the way, you know, Leah and Yusuf also owned their apartment.
That's right.
He kept saying they're renters. They're not. They were owners.
Yep.
But so she, I think, left him right after, or something. Like, there was, you know, she was not necessarily like supportive of him, but she made this statement that said, look, he didn't do it because he hated their religion. Like, he didn't do it for religious reasons or whatever. And I don't know why she made that. We tried to get in touch with her and interview her.
Did you? Okay.
We tried to get in touch with his kids and interview them. They declined. Some of them, we couldn't even find them. Like, we had to hire like an investigator to try to find them, and it was really difficult to find them. So I think for them, they're just like, they disowned him.
Yeah, I mean, trying to get away from that, like that energy.
Yeah. I mean, and you look at, when you see the film, you see kind of a window into his life.
Yeah.
You're like, there's no way this guy's married and has kids and has any responsibility, because he's playing video games all day.
And the pictures of the inside of the apartment,
they're ridiculous.
Like,
it was,
could live like this.
It was,
and his car
is absolute chaos.
Seriously. Yeah. I mean, it's just wild to think. I mean, you know, in our day-to-day life, you kind of interact with your group of people, right? And you like forget that there's characters like that are, I mean, right down the street, 30 minutes down the road, whatever.
But I think that's part of it, Jeb. Like, I think he was going through this problem in his marriage. He was like going to community college at, I don't know how old he was, like 40 something or whatever. He didn't really own it. His wife owned the apartment.
Right.
Like, all these things that he didn't have. Yusur and Leah they just got married, and they're super like in their honeymoon phase, right?
Yeah.
They own their house, right? They're up and coming in terms of he's a dentist, and she's taking classes right now. She's already graduated, and she's going to dentistry school.
Yep.
Like, all these things and they have friends coming around all the time, and they're super happy.
Thriving.
Their parents are helping, you know, everybody's thriving, and he's looking around like, they don't look like me, they don't act like me, they're not part of this, you know, whatever
different clothes,
quote unquote community. Yeah. And it's like, all right, I need to, you know, I'm not happy about this.
Yeah.
So
when you were kind of, I guess, digging into his persona and his character, like, part of what was hit on in the film was also like I think it was his Facebook feed of like some of his commentary and whatnot. Did you get any more insight into like what other inputs he might have had to like impact his psyche? Because to me, it felt like there had to be some sort of like negative community or something that he was tapped into to give him.
Totally. I mean, look, and I said this at the panel when we had it, we're not born racists. Like, nobody's born, like, babies don't come out and they're like, hey, I'm a racist. No, you know, like, I don't like this.
Everyone's your homie on the preschool playground.
Exactly.
Right? Like,
exactly. So you're absolutely right. Something and someone and people and whatever it was, it impacted this deep hate for a certain type of people or people that don't, like when he's interacting with the cops, white cops, he's like homies with them.
Yep.
But they're about to put him in prison for the rest of his life, but he's super cooperative and supporting, and like, and they're having great conversation.
Yeah.
He was making jokes.
Yeah. He was. Yeah.
He was making jokes.
So like, how do you go?
Probably shouldn't have said that.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
bro, what
That's
are you
perfect.
doing?
That's perfect. That was good. So you start wondering, like, you're right. Like, where did he get this, deep hate from? And when you look at his feeds and stuff, so what we found was so interesting because at the time we're seeing, people coming from the right wing, right?
Yeah.
Say, hey, I'm deeply like religious and Christian, whatever, like, and I don't want immigrants and I don't want diversity and I don't want whatever, like this whole white privilege. But he wasn't on the right. He was like, he was anti-religious.
That's
like,
right.
He was against religion.
Yeah.
So it was such an enigma. It was like trying to figure out, like, okay, if he's let's say, ultra right wing, then you can put him into that kind of category. But he's not. He's like totally left in terms of like,
that's right.
I don't believe in religion. I don't believe in whatever. Like he's supporting all. But then he also supports gun rights. Like, so it was like
he was a weird hybrid.
Yeah. So what we realized throughout this research is racism and hate doesn't have a political party. It doesn't have a religion.
That's good.
You could be Muslim, which we know our religion says you cannot be racist because we are one human body. Like God created all of us. So if you're disrespecting another creation of God, then you're disrespecting God. Right? So we know that, but there are Muslims that are racist.
Yeah, they throw that out the window.
Exactly. So when you start to break it down and say, okay, when he hears someone say in any political leader that says Islam hates us, or they talk about, hey, we've got to get these brown whatever out of our country, or we got to go through these people out, or they're not American or whatever, that speaks to him, even if it's coming from a different political ideology. Right? Because it's speaking to his deep hate of anyone other than himself.
He's just latching onto that message.
Whoever
sort of is
supporting
it.
Exactly. So racism is an ideology. And then you start to see, well, when does that become absolute hate for somebody else? Like you could be racist and still like, whatever, I'll buy my groceries from, someone from a different race or whatever. But this guy got it to a point where he wasn't just saying the words, he wasn't just posting it about it, he wasn't just scaring people and brandishing his gun like Usman was saying. He actually took initiative and said, I'm going to kill these people, I'm going to end them.
That's right.
That's a whole nother level.
I guess like the spectrum of racism.
But that's where it starts. It starts with me believing that I'm better than you.
Yeah, that's right.
Just that simple. I'm better than you. Why? Well, because I look different, or because I grew up here, or because I own you rent. Right? Just that little bit, and then it escalates.
It's like water seeping into a rock and freezing, and it just gets a little deeper. It spreads it a little more, a little more.
And a lot of that is also fueled, when you have those core foundations of arrogance, right, where you're saying like, hey, I'm better than you, you're also naturally going to be inclined to receive information from social media on those types of feeds, right? So you're going to start,
the algorithms start working.
The algorithms start to, push those racist,
we're gonna need
racist
another
narratives.
Skit from Omar with the
it
was something here.
But like those algorithms will start to push those racist narratives and like towards your feed, whether it's through groups, through posts, and those were the types of things that he was, sharing and embodying throughout that whole time.
it's like you're on the football team and you're getting hyped up for the game, and then all your boys are like, yeah.
Exactly.
Screw those guys, like, and then I'm gonna do it, and then the one guy who's a loose cannon decides to take action. It's wild.
Did you see the Alabama? There's like the two Alabama guys.
No,
one black guy, one white guy, and they're like, "Yeah, nobody can beat us," and they're like, "Yeah." My son just showed me it's like a little Instagram. It's hilarious, man.
My favorite is the scene from Remember the Titans where he's like, "Strong side,
weak
side." Yeah,
I love that.
That one will give you goosebumps.
Yeah.
So, it's when we're talking about these like characters, right? Where there's like, to your point, this spectrum of racism. I don't know if this is a question that we can even answer, but it's like I'm so curious about how many people are that extreme in the United States. Like, how many characters have gone that far to the point where they're like a hair trigger away from like the next thing that happens, I'm gonna go into my closet, wherever it is. It's like, and I hope there's not a lot of that, but it does
Jeb,
make you think.
We've seen it, man.
Yeah.
School shootings.
That's
right?
true.
I mean, how many have we had? There was just another shooting in a mall, recently. There's all kinds of, there's stabbings. There's all kinds of things that are happening where if we don't watch what we say, especially our political leaders, our, law enforcement, our leaders we look up to wherever they are in society and community.
Yeah.
If we're not being anti-racist and anti-hate and like really kind of proactive in that language and helping people identify that, hey, we have to kind of correct to the other side and be like, no, like we do not accept that anybody thinks they're better than somebody else who's a human being. Like, you could be better at whatever you're doing, right? Like, I don't know if I shared this, but my parents used to teach us, like, don't ever say that you hate like broccoli.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
I'm like, who cares? Like, I hate broccoli. Like, no.
I'm not eating it, Mom.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I don't want to eat it, And it's like, don't say you hate it. Just say you don't like how it tastes, because it's a creation of God. So any creation of God, you don't say you hate it. So like, we'd say like, man, I hate John. I hate hanging out with John, right? It's like, no. Say you hate what John does, but you can't hate John. Right? He's a creation of God. He's part of the family. He's part of the human family.
Yeah.
And I didn't realize this until the nuance kind of hit me, but nobody taught Craig Hicks that. Nobody teaches racists that. Because if they taught them that, they wouldn't hate other people, and then they wouldn't escalate to that level. So,
I think that was a point that I remember we also brought up during the screening, during the panel discussion, was that hate is fundamentally taught over a long period of time, and it festers within the heart. To your point earlier, you don't hate the person, you don't hate the individual, you just hate the actions that they commit. And it takes a lot of self-awareness to not only unlearn those tendencies, but you also have to be in the right state of mind, and your heart needs to be in the right state of condition to be able to be open to change. That's there was a lady in the audience, I remember she had asked, it was something along the lines of like, she felt this like great responsibility that she needed to like kind of like change the world, or like change everyone's perspective.
Yeah, she was like, it's overwhelming trying to figure out how I can like combat this or something.
Exactly.
Was like the general tone.
Exactly. And it's like it's not all on her to do it at the end of the day, right? Like it also comes down to the individual. If the individual is not willing to learn, or again be open to exploring what, for example, like what Islam means, or exploring what the story is all about, then it's kind of it's kind of a dead end at the end of the day, right?
Or those aren't the battles that you should be fighting, I guess. Like you should be doing your best to put out your message.
Exactly. I think I said this also in the discussion too, where there was a post, I think, by WRAL that they shared about the documentary and for the screening in Witherspoon. And there were unfortunately some very racist comments in that post. And
this was a post promoting the screening at NC State.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah, this was on Instagram. And I saw this through someone else's story. And as I was scrolling down again, hate is one of those things that, you know, once it starts, it is a domino effect that can really get people riled up.
Yeah.
Now, the only way I felt like I could kind of like combat the situation was I was like, hey, look, I am a Pakistani American, right? I was born overseas and I grew up here. I was very much involved as a filmmaker and storyteller in this film. Please come out. You know, please come out to the screening. It's completely free. And if you have any questions, like, let's talk, right? We're having an open panel discussion. And I'd love to, you know, hear what you have to say.
But Usman, the crazy thing is, because the cowards are the ones that post like that, right? The cowards are the ones that comment. So what you did was amazing, because you're calling them out and saying, hey, I'm here to talk. Yeah. If you want to really address, if you feel like this, whatever the comments were, if you feel like you're right about this, come with me and disconfirm your beliefs. Like, come have a conversation. Be a truth seeker, you know?
Instead of a keyboard warrior.
Exactly. Yeah. But because they're cowards and they want to just reinforce their bias and their racism and their perspective, they'd never do that. And the ones that do, I commend them.
Yeah, and they all do it behind like the comfort of their own phones.
Yeah.
At the end.
There's like the digital conversation and there's like the real world. And I do feel like there's a drastic difference there, because there's a lot of people that like to be the trolls. There's a lot of people that like to just say their piece. But to your point, they're not going to show up and do the work or hear the thing.
Exactly.
In person. Not
exactly.
At
all. But that's part of the problem I feel like,
because people who are very susceptible to that digital wave of communication, like maybe a Craig Hicks or whatever, like that's their tribe. They're like, those are my people.
Right. That's their comfort level.
And then I do this in the real world because I saw all this stuff online, and you're like,
I think Sharif, you, in the podcast, the last one, the two before, he mentioned something like that about like being close to nature, right, and like being close to like the natural order of things, and like being close to people and getting connected with people versus like isolating and separating. The more we distance from each other, the more we hate each other.
Yeah, exactly.
The more we have the ability to hate each other.
We're in our little silos, and it's and we're getting DoorDash, and we're eating crap food, and we're not getting sunlight. Exactly. We're not outside.
You know what I love? Like in football, I love football. Yeah. So when I watch it, like these guys are battling against each other, right? Like two teams battling. They're tackling each other. They're like going at it, and then after the game, they hug each other.
Yeah,
I'm like, that's beautiful. Yeah. Like that kind of sportsmanship where it's like, on the field, we're going to tear each other up. But afterwards, I love you as a human being. I love you as my brother. Like, you know, we're
thing with
cool.
like UFC fighters or you know, not all of them, but a lot of them, they're giving each other hugs. Like, we just went to war.
Yeah. We just went to war. And then there's mutual respect.
Yeah. Mutual respect.
Yeah. And stuff like that makes, you know, the relationship a lot more dignified.
Yeah.
As well. And, you know, for people like us in a position where, you know, when we're receiving that kind of hate, it's honestly the best approach that we can take. And the cards on, like, you know, the cards on their end, you know, for however they want to receive that information.
Well, there's a verse from the Quran that says, "Idfa billati hiya ahsan," like push and lead with what is better.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Yeah. And then maybe those who you hated or hated you become your closest friends.
Yeah.
Your loving friends.
Yeah.
So I'm like, what Usman was doing, you know, reaching out to people and the way that he was interacting, that's exactly how we need to be as just human beings. It's like, hey, you can cuss me out, but I'm going to come back and say, hey, you want to have lunch? Let's talk about it. Like, what did I do to like hurt you? What did I do to make you react this way?
Yeah.
Let's talk through it. And that takes courage.
It really does.
And then maybe we discover something about each other and we get a lot closer.
Yeah. You know? During so I'm really, really thankful that this film got selected to be in Doc NYC.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember at the screening afterwards, I think Suzanne Abu Salha, who's Barakat, sorry, who's Dia's sister, you could tell how tired she was. For just it's one of those things where, yes, the story needs to be told, but you're having to go through the review process of exposing their trauma in front of them over and over again.
For sure, yeah.
And I remember one of the things that she said was, she just doesn't want to carry that responsibility anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And, to me, as someone who was involved in this project, I'm like, you know what? I can take some of that on.
Yeah.
I'll never be able to fully understand the full extent of what she went through, but if I can be an ambassador for this project, for the Muslim community, and actually live my life in a way where I can do my best to combat hate, I'm going to do it so that the Abu Salhas and the Barakats can kind of move forward in peace.
Yeah.
Because they've really been exposed to so much within the past 6 to 8 years.
Carry the torch.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the things, like, watching the film, you can't help but think, like, how does a false narrative, a misconstrued narrative get out? Like, why did essentially what you were saying before, this guy's word get taken out as like the story? This is the truth. This is the national headline. This is what happened. When you were going through this process, and I know you guys got to do some interviews with the police and etc., what did this sentiment feel like on, because it felt like there were people who were advocating like, this is really messed up and we're trying to do it, but then there were also other people that seemed to be a little more complacent. But I'm curious if there were even other people who were like, no, we were right. Like, what did that dynamic look like across all the different levels, whether it was police, whether it was lawyers, whether it was officials, whatever that may mean? How did those interviews play out to say, like, who believed this and why,
Yeah, I personally wasn't there to, film
Chief Blue.
Yeah, Chief Blue. But my understanding kind of, from that film was, because this happened in Chapel Hill, they had to put something out, right? And that was the only information that was accessible at the time. No one, I think,
it's
did
like
their due diligence.
Nobody wanted to make the call, so
nobody
like,
wanted to make the call,
thing.
or
like,
nobody wanted to take the due diligence to just check the scene of the crime, to see how accurate this was.
Yeah.
I honestly don't know if it was just from the pressure of the media to put out an official statement, because this went viral, like almost overnight.
Worldwide.
CNN, Fox, worldwide,
For sure.
like every national news channel took this on.
Yeah.
I'll give you, I don't know if this is controversial or not, but
Yeah.
I'm just giving you my own perspective.
Yeah, please.
Tariq could probably speak to it a lot better in terms of the actual interviews and kind of the scenes in the back, but like behind the scenes stuff. But for me, I feel like if I'm going to give the police and the media and lawyers and everybody else the benefit of the doubt, and just say, look, everybody was trying their best, they're doing their job, they're trying to calm a community that was up in arms, saying, are we safe? Are we safe to send our kids to school? Like, is somebody targeting Muslims? Like, what should we do? And the police just said, hey, there's an easy explanation for this. It's a parking dispute. Why would this guy lie? He just confessed. He came into the, to the station. Why would he, like, that's the benefit of the doubt, right?
For sure.
But here's what happens when we don't actually know each other, when we don't want to get, like, you're doing this podcast. You're finding out a lot of stuff about Usman, about me, our thoughts, perspectives. That's you getting to know us. That's you starting to say, do I have shared values with these guys? Like you guys already have, kind of a shared experience.
For sure.
But we didn't know each other.
No, not at
and
all.
We're getting to know each other, right?
Yeah.
Now you start to know things about me and and when somebody says, hey, what did Omar mean when he said this comment? You might be able to respond and say, no, he wasn't. He was just joking about that.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Because we spent time together.
That's right.
But when you have law enforcement or media that just wants to get their job done, and before the incident, not after, I think they spent time, they did, I don't know the details of that, but if you're not getting to know this community and understanding their mindset, their worldview, whatever you do is probably is going to be, taken a certain way, right?
Yeah.
You might be saying things that you think is best for the community when in reality it's the exact opposite.
Interesting.
And that's
just kind
where
of ignorant to
it's ignorance, man.
Yeah.
It's ignorance, and this is just my perspective. Some of it you could say some people maybe purposefully or whatever. I don't know. I can't speak to that.
Yeah.
But all I'm saying is there's ignorance, and you can fill that ignorance with knowledge. And this is where like Suzanne's big statement about, what if you just sat down and had dinner with them, kind of thing, versus like, hey, let me go shoot them. Like, get to know people. Like, and that's on us too. Like, if you don't have representation, if we don't have Muslims in law enforcement, if we don't have Muslims, Muslim lawyers, Muslims in the media, I think you guys saw this in the movie. This was one of the, I don't know if you caught it, Jeb, but for me, after seeing it multiple times and having conversations with this person, with Romana, it really highlighted to me how important it is to have representation. Yeah. So if you remember about the statement that President Obama put out in the beginning, right? The first statement that he put out, that was days after the incident. And so while the police rushed to get the statement out about the parking dispute, our president didn't put out any statement for like a few days. And so the family's like, what's going on? Like, at least say this was a heinous crime. This was a tragedy. This was,
at least condemn it.
At least condemn the crime, right? Even if you don't talk about the family, just condemn the crime. But he didn't. And so at least what Romana mentions in the movie, she talks about how she was in the White House. She worked in the White House. She worked for,
that's right,
one of the White House's, one of the president's senior staff, who she's basically said, like, what if this was me? Would you guys be debating, like, do you put out a statement or not?
That's right.
And I was like, man, imagine if she wasn't there.
Yeah.
How much longer would that statement have been delayed?
If there wasn't even a statement,
or if even
right.
if there would be a
Exactly.
statement at all.
Yeah.
So representation is important because anyone outside the community could never fully understand what that community is going through. And so two things. One is get to know people. Like, go visit with them, talk to them, ask them questions. They'll be open about things.
Yeah.
And then two, that community needs to also have people representing them in society, in different parts of society.
Yeah.
There's a saying in Islam, and I don't know the full Arabic verse, but essentially it's like Allah created us in tribes so that we get to know one another. And without
it's all people, right? So it's not just Muslim, it's all people.
Yeah.
We created you from male and female and put you into nations and tribes so that you get to know each other.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And so think about that, like diversity. Go ahead, Alice.
Yeah. I think, again, the true ignorance, comes from when, if you're a police department and you don't even know the people that you're supposed to serve and protect. You don't even know the people that you're supposed to serve and protect, and that, this is, where our tax dollars go to at the end of the day. how can we trust them to represent us and, you know, protect us, even like from a media perspective,
protect our well-being,
our well-being in the event that something like this could happen again. Because this, you know, as you know, in the documentary, like hate crimes are ever so skyrocketing, you know, since 2015.
Yeah.
So it goes back to our point where it's just like, talk to your neighbor. I love it when, you know, like when I get to talk to people and I, you know, introduce myself and, you know, I tell them my name, my background, and they're like, oh, you know, you might not be from here. You like, you know, are you Muslim? And I love it when people ask me about my religion, because it's an opportunity for me to just combat some of, you know, the things that they may have, you know, misinterpretations about. And, you know, I'm able to just say like, hey, we're actually quite peaceful.
Well, there was an interesting part in I think it was the panel maybe after the movie where someone was talking about how essentially the culture has been vilified in Hollywood for the last like 30 years or something, was it? Like,
yeah, there's a book, Real, like REEL, Real Bad Arabs. And it's a great, you know, I mean, the author, I think Jack Shaheen, he paints a really interesting picture of how Hollywood, just like black exploitation films, and they typecast you into like the terrorist and the crazy Arab and the sheikh, that, you know, wealthy sheikh or whatever, and that's it. That's all you are
all you get,
to society. So, and then there's a back to your point, Usman, like you were saying about getting to know each other. There's a power dynamic there. So, like, if you're in a powerful position or you've been entrusted with a power, like for example at work, I would tell people my door is always open because I have a team, and and then I'm like, hey, you know, how come I didn't know such and such person was struggling with something? And they're like, well, you didn't ask. And it's like, well, why didn't they come to me? They know my door is always open, but you can't expect people reporting to you to feel, because they might feel intimidated. They might feel like, oh, if I tell him this, he might think of me differently or whatever. You have to go, like this idea of servant leadership. You've got to go to them and be like, hey, how can I help you? What's going on? And I learned that the hard way. I mean, it's not easy because you think you have a lot of responsibility.
Like, hey, I did everything I had to do, and I told them. But
exactly. So when the cops are like, well, we're here, like, come talk to us. Like, it's like, no, you're in the position of power. You politicians are also in a position of power. You go get to know the community. Don't just go to them to get your votes. Go actually know who they are. Find out what these people are about.
It's the people who are in a position of power who have to take the step forward to build trust within their community, within the community that they have to serve.
I know you want to think that like every, you know, official, every officer is like the truth seeker and they always have the best intention, but there's bad plumbers, there's bad electricians, there's bad police officers, you know, whatever it is. And like, man,
bad podcasters. Not you though. Not you. Bad media personalities. No, Jem's a great one. He's one of the best.
Where does, you know, I don't think we're giving away too much by saying like at the end of the film, it's basically said that this is still not labeled as a hate crime, which was essentially a lot of what the advocating throughout the film was about. Where does this stand today? Like, what is there any more conversation around this? What's the current update with the film? What's going on?
So it's still not labeled a hate crime. And a lot of it is because there's all these technicalities in terms of the law and regulation and state and federal. So ultimately, it wasn't labeled. And the tragedy there is like when we can't label acts like this a hate crime, then what's a hate crime? Like how many are we missing? How many hate crimes are out there? If we want to treat something, anything, any illness, you got to know, like, where is it? What's the impact of it? How is it hurting the body or whatever, right? Well, if you don't have the data, if you don't have the statistics, if you're not tracking it, if you don't understand where it's happening more or where it's happening less or whatever, how do you treat this?
Yep.
You know, this disease. And hate is I think, in my opinion, is the biggest, most problematic disease that we have as a human race, right?
Yeah.
Because
worse than cancer, worse than,
totally.
diabetes. Like hate is like, it's like an intangible disease that
well, we were kind of hitting on earlier just about how contagious it can be.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And online, it can spread like wildfire. Yeah. Even on a post promoting a screening of a local,
exactly
documentary, there's hate. It's like
the irony behind that was like there was hate on a post on this documentary that's supposed to combat hate.
Yeah,
exactly. It just attracts different
well,
crowd.
What that shows you, like, it doesn't matter what you hate.
Yeah.
Like, I can hate people wearing black shirts.
Yeah.
Right?
This guy.
Sucks. Right? And then tomorrow I hate people wearing gray shirts. And then the next day
I hate bald people.
Right? Like me and you we're done.
We're screwed.
Right? So when you hate, it does spread. It's contagious not only to other people but to other things. Mm-hmm. Like other things that you choose to hate, because then you're just like you're engrossed with this feeling of like, I got to hate something today. Because that's what gets me going, right?
Yeah.
So we gotta stop that nonsense,
right? For sure.
And get people. So the film, right now, we are doing private screenings, just like we did. So there might be one in the UNC Chapel Hill area soon, probably around May timeframe.
Cool.
But then we're, and Jeb, this is the biggest thing that I've learned as an executive producer, is like you can produce and create amazing content, and you're going to face this as well, like as a podcaster and as a creator.
Yeah. But
there's like, in my mind, this is my own theory, and maybe somebody else had come up with it, and I'm stealing something, but I don't know. But for a marketplace to exist, there are 4 different elements.
Yeah.
There's the content creators, so those could be any creator, artists,
of all sizes.
Yeah, artists, poets, filmmakers, athletes, entrepreneurs, people that create. Then you have the distributors and the distribution network. Then you have the customers, the paying customers. And then you have the consumers. So sometimes the consumer and the paying customer are the same, sometimes they're not. Like your parents might pay for something and you're consuming it, right? Yep. So if you have content creators, like our film, we created that content. You've said, other people have said, amazing, should be on Netflix.
Yeah.
But it's not getting bought by the distributors, and it's not being distributed. So how do you get it to customers and consumers? Mm-hmm. Especially if they're like, hey, this is great, I want it, but where do I get it? Which is the question we were asked on the panel. Yeah. Like, how do I... So it's like, well, we haven't gotten a distributor to buy it yet.
Yeah.
All of them, the main ones, have seen it. They've commented like very high praise. They're like, amazing. But they're like, oh, it doesn't, necessarily fit our, strategy for this year, or it doesn't fit our budget, or it doesn't fit whatever.
Yeah.
And we're not looking necessarily for money. We're looking for eyeballs, right? We want people to see it and be impacted by it. So now we're kind of in this dilemma of like, do we just offer it through some kind of streaming service that goes direct to consumer?
Yeah.
Do we just do more private screenings, go into a couple more film festivals and see if it gets picked up that way?
Yeah.
Or do we just take a shot with a production company and say, okay, you guys got it, like go put it out there everywhere. We want it on Amazon, we want it on Apple, we want it on Tubi or whatever, all the different streaming services, and forget about recouping any costs. The problem with that is those content creators then don't create any more content like that. Because they're not getting paid
that wasn't
for it.
worth it.
Yeah.
I just lost X amount of dollars.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, Dark from the get-go, day one, it's been 8 years. 8 years of fundraising, bringing together resources, using them. I mean,
sweat equity.
Sweat equity as well, right? Like, and especially, you know, out in Hollywood, like, you know, he's got his own family to feed as well. He's got
and going up on YouTube isn't going to recoup an investment of that size.
Exactly.
You had some obscene number of, you know, viewership. You're not promised distribution there either.
Yeah.
It's such a tricky formula. I like what you're talking about with the different pieces of the equation, though. And unfortunately, some of those are now gatekeepers.
That's the problem. Because you got minority groups that don't have a seat at that table.
Yep.
So just like we said about community, when you don't know, you're not part of a community and you haven't learned what they need and who they are and what they care about, you're never going to produce content for them or distribute content for them.
Yeah.
Because you're going to distribute content for those who you know or those who are paying you, you know, and so that's where it gets tricky.
It also goes back to the diversity element of, you know, we also need to have, you know, minorities in, you know, in those positions, like even though those are positions of power as well. People who are like the distribution gatekeepers, who can relate to content like this and who understand the demand of why this needs to be put out on these streaming services.
It's funny when they make the comment about like it's not in our budget or in like our content lineup, because how many death of insert young female, you know, abducted, whatever it is. Like that's my Netflix recommended, and it might be because of my girlfriend. I don't know if it's because of me. It's like one after another. I'm like, how many people got abducted? Like,
I've been watching the cold cases stuff. Yeah, it's really fascinating because DNA and technology, whatever. Yeah. But like, everybody that watches our, it's like this has to be on Netflix.
Yeah.
You know, and that they were the first people we went to, and they were really generous with their time, their review, and. But I think it got to a point where they had to make it. Now, the other things, we got offers from international distributors. Cool. But we're like, this is an American story. We want the American audience to see this. Yeah. And so that's where now we have to start looking at some other options because it's getting to that point. But we're going to go direct to consumer at some point because if that's the only option we have.
Yeah. Well, I know there's a lot of platforms of that today. But if Netflix is listening, y'all got to get your act together. What's going on?
Hey, don't just call it Netflix. Hey, HBO, Hulu, where are you at?
Yeah. Well, guys, that was like an hour, man. This was cool getting to chop it up with you guys.
Yeah, no,
I appreciate y'all coming out and doing this.
Thanks for the time, the space.
Fun.
Yeah, no, this was a super important conversation to have. And
give everyone the name and the site and whatnot for now.
Yeah, so the name of the film is 36 Seconds, Portrait of a Hate Crime. I think the name of the site, I'll leave that to...
Same thing, it's 36 Seconds.
36secondsfilm.com.
Yeah, 36secondsfilm.com. You can go online to check out the latest screenings that are available you know, around the nation. We're doing... screenings all over the US right now. I think the next one is in Boston. And then, you know, we'll have...
But all that's on the website?
All that's on the website.
Perfect.
I think we have Chapel Hill coming up shortly after.
Sweet.
Yeah.
Well, Omar, Uzi, this was great. I appreciate you guys coming in here.
No, thanks for having us.
Thank
you.
Thanks for listening.
Yeah, it was awesome. Yeah. I hope this your podcast just beats Joe Rogan and
brick by brick.
Shay, all these guys.
Brick by brick. We're working on it.
You got a cool setup here.
Here's hoping, man.
This is awesome.
Thanks, man. Well, goodbye, everybody.